The cabin buzzed with the low hum of chatter, the whir of the engines, and the occasional clink of drink carts being rolled down the aisles. Lila, the flight attendant, had seen it all in her years of service: self-important businessmen, frazzled families, and demanding celebrities. But none had gotten under her skin like the man sitting in 4A. With his perfectly combed hair, crisply pressed suit, and oversized aviators, he looked like someone who thought the world owed him something. And right now, he was throwing a tantrum because the Wi-Fi wasn't working. "Are you kidding me?" he snapped as Lila approached, his voice rising. "How can a plane in 2025 not have decent Wi-Fi?" She forced a polite smile. "I'm sorry, sir, but our Wi-Fi is temporarily down. We're doing our best to get it up and running." He rolled his eyes, clearly uninterested in hearing her explanation. Lila had dealt with passengers like him before: rich, entitled, and too used to getting their way. But this time, she was done. "Maybe next time you can buy a plane with better technology," she muttered under her breath as she walked away, fully expecting him to just grumble and move on. But then, as she passed by again to collect trash, she noticed the man was staring at her with an intense look. "What did you say?" he asked coolly. Lila froze. She had no idea who this guy was. "I said, next time you might want to look into upgrading your plane's Wi-Fi," she repeated, her tone a little more daring than she meant. The man chuckled, a small smirk forming at the corner of his mouth. "You know, you're absolutely right," he said, standing up and adjusting his jacket. "But it seems I've got better things to do than worry about Wi-Fi." Lila stared at him, confusion mixing with a twinge of guilt. Who was this guy? Really? He stepped aside, revealing a shiny silver briefcase sitting next to his seat. As she turned to leave, she caught sight of his ID badge peeking out from the top: Jeff Bezos. Lila's heart skipped a beat. The Jeff Bezos? She had just insulted one of the richest men in the world. Lila's heart skipped a beat as she tried to process what had just happened. Jeff Bezos. The name echoed in her head like a freight train. The Amazon founder. The billionaire mogul. The man whose face graced every major news outlet. How had she not recognized him? She quickly turned back, her face flushed with a mix of panic and disbelief. She could feel her legs going wobbly beneath her. But there was no turning back now. "Sir," she stammered, suddenly struggling to maintain her composure. I didn't know who you were. I didn't mean to." Bezos raised a hand, his smirk still playing at the corners of his mouth. "Relax, Lila," he said, his voice smooth and surprisingly calm. "I'm used to it. You're not the first person to think I'm just some rich guy with a bad attitude. But hey," he paused, glancing out the window as if pondering something. "You're not wrong. You know, it's just that I'm kind of used to getting what I want." Lila's brain was spinning. She felt herself shrink under the weight of his presence. She had insulted him, flippantly, carelessly, without realizing who he was. She had no idea how to recover from this. "Look," Bezos continued, lowering his voice slightly as if sharing a secret. "I can't blame you. People who don't know me think I'm just another arrogant CEO. But I can be a bit of a pain sometimes too. Right? And, well, that Wi-Fi issue? It's frustrating for everyone." She blinked, confused. Was he trying to make her feel better? Was this some weird attempt to laugh it off? Lila wasn't sure what to make of his sudden shift in demeanor. Before she could say anything else, the plane suddenly jerked as it hit a patch of turbulence. She grabbed the seat for balance, her heart racing. But Bezos simply chuckled. Now that was something to be upset about, he joked. Not sure how many servers are running in the cloud, but I'm guessing not many of them are bracing for turbulence. The unexpected humor caught Lila off guard. It almost felt normal. As the plane leveled off, Lila glanced down at the briefcase again, noting the polished shine. She had been so caught up in the moment. She hadn't even considered the oddity of his situation. Why was he traveling commercial? On a regular flight? No less? Wasn't he used to private jets? Bezos caught her glance and seemed to read her thoughts. Yes. I do own a fleet of private jets. But sometimes it's nice to sit among people. Hear what's going on in the world. This. Right here, he gestured to the entire cabin. This is where the action happens. Isn't it? Lila wasn't sure how to respond. Her mind was still whirling with the initial shock. But now there was something more. She had always assumed billionaires lived in a different world, entirely disconnected from everyday life. This was different. Look, Lila, Bezos said, his tone suddenly more serious. I respect honesty. It's one of the few things in this world that's still valuable. You weren't rude to me. You were just speaking your mind. And I can respect that. Lila blinked, still unsure how to respond. Was this some sort of elaborate joke? He was smiling. But there was something about the way he spoke that made her feel like she had just stumbled upon a hidden truth about him. Thank you, she managed, finding her voice. I really didn't mean to offend you. Bezos waved a hand dismissively. It's all right. But if you want to make it up to me, he paused for a beat, letting the words hang in the air. How about you take a seat and have a drink with me? I'm sure the flight crew has something interesting to offer. Her eyes widened. Did he just invite her to sit with him? This Jeff Bezos? The same one who had built an empire that changed the world? The rest of the flight was a blur. Lila found herself sitting next to him, sipping a glass of wine as Bezos casually told stories about the early days of Amazon, how he had started in a tiny garage, how he would deliver packages to customers personally, how he never imagined it would get this big. She listened intently, captivated not just by the stories, but by the man himself. He was humble. Despite his wealth, he was passionate. Despite his success, and he was, dare she say it, kind. As the plane began its descent, Lila realized something profound. The man she had insulted was the same one who had changed the way the world shopped, who had created new industries, and who was still at the forefront of innovation. And somehow, despite everything, he seemed just like anyone else. Lila, Bezos said as the plane touched down. You'll be all right. Keep speaking your mind. Keep challenging people. And one day, you'll find yourself in a position where people are listening. Lila nodded, a bit overwhelmed, but with a new sense of respect, for him and for herself. Who knew that a moment of tension and awkwardness could lead to something far more meaningful? As she walked back to her post, she caught herself smiling. Maybe the universe had a funny way of working things out after all. As the plane taxied to the gate, Lila's mind was still buzzing. She had just shared a drink with one of the most influential people in the world. And somehow, it felt normal. But there was something else lurking beneath the surface, an unease that wouldn't go away. The way Bezos had spoken about challenging people, the way his eyes had glinted when he'd said it, it made her wonder if she had just unwittingly passed some kind of test. The other flight attendants were already bustling around, preparing for the disembarkation. Lila lingered near the galley, her thoughts racing. She had to pull herself together. This wasn't the time to daydream about billionaires. She had a job to do. But then her phone buzzed, pulling her out of her reverie. It was a notification from the airline's internal messaging system. Her eyes widened as she read the message. Lila, please report to the captain's office immediately after deplaning. Her stomach dropped. What could this be about? Had she done something wrong? Maybe she was being called out for talking to a passenger too long. Or worse, maybe there had been a complaint about her. She quickly shoved the phone back into her pocket and tried to act casual as the passengers stood up to gather their things. As she walked down the jet bridge, her thoughts ran wild. She passed Bezos's seat and saw him standing up, pulling his briefcase from the overhead compartment. He caught her eye and gave her a small nod, as if nothing had happened. It was surreal. How one moment could change everything. Once the passengers had disembarked, Lila made her way to the captain's office, her heart pounding with anticipation. She knocked softly before entering. "Come in," a deep voice called. She pushed the door open to find Captain Harris sitting behind his desk, his face serious. Beside him, to Lila's surprise, was another man, dressed in a sharp suit, his salt and pepper hair neatly combed, and a look on his face that made her stomach flip. The man stood as she entered, offering a firm handshake. "Lila, I'd like to introduce you to someone," Captain Harris said, his tone uncharacteristically warm. "This is Mr. David Armstrong. He's our chief executive at the airline." Lila's mind reeled. Chief executive? The chief executive was here? She had only heard whispers about him. He was notoriously private, never seen in public. The man was practically a ghost in the corporate world. She had no idea why he was here, but it only added to the confusion of the moment. "Nice to meet you, Lila," Mr. Armstrong said, his voice smooth and reassuring. But his eyes were sharp, evaluating. "Nice to meet you, sir," Lila replied, her mind still racing. She had no idea what this was about, but something told her it wasn't going to be a routine conversation. "Lila," Captain Harris began, his voice more serious now, "I know you've had an interesting interaction with one of our passengers today. Mr. Bezos. To be specific." Lila froze, her blood running cold. How did they know? Bezos had said he respected her honesty, but she had never imagined it would lead to this. "Mr. Bezos spoke very highly of you," Captain Harris continued. "He said you handled yourself well, and that your quick thinking helped diffuse a potentially tense situation." "Wait. What?" Lila stammered, struggling to make sense of the words. "I thought you. I mean, I didn't realize it was him until after I said, well, it's all right, Lila," Mr. Armstrong interjected. "What you don't know is that Mr. Bezos has a very particular way of assessing people. He's been known to, let's say, test those around him. He's not easily impressed. And when he sees potential, he takes notice." Lila's eyes widened. "Wait. You mean he wasn't mad?"
Captain Harris smiled. "He could have been. But instead, he saw something in you. And that's why you're here."
Lila's mind was spinning. What the hell is going on? Mr. Armstrong continued. Mr. Bezos wanted us to offer you a unique opportunity. He's interested in bringing someone like you into a new project we're launching. He believes you have the kind of raw, unfiltered honesty that's hard to find these days.
Lila's jaw dropped. Are you telling me that Jeff Bezos wants me to join a project of his? Not just join, Mr. Armstrong said, his eyes gleaming with purpose. He's offering you a role. A leadership role. But it's up to you whether you accept it. Lila felt like she had just been struck by lightning. The last 20 minutes had completely turned her life upside down. She had insulted Jeff Bezos, one of the wealthiest people on the planet, and now he was offering her a role in his next big venture? I don't know what to say, she whispered. The weight of the decision hitting her all at once. This is crazy. Mr. Armstrong's expression softened. I understand. It's a big decision. But just remember, Lila. Sometimes opportunities come from the most unexpected places. Lila took a step back, trying to process it all. Was she ready for this? Did she want to leave her life as a flight attendant behind for a chance to work with one of the most powerful men in the world? She had always been happy with her job, hadn't she? Before she could speak, the door opened, and a familiar face stepped inside. It was Bezos. Bezos stepped into the room, his gaze locking onto Lila with an intensity that made her heart race. He walked toward her. And for a split second, it felt like the whole room went silent. Everything all right here? He asked. His voice calm but carrying an undeniable weight. Lila swallowed hard. She had expected him to leave after speaking with the captain. But here he was. Back again. His presence felt more overwhelming than ever. We were just talking about the offer, Mr. Armstrong said, his tone professional. Lila's considering joining the project. Bezos looked at Lila with a knowing smile. As if he had already made up his mind about her. As if he knew exactly what she was thinking. The idea of her rejecting this opportunity was absurd to him. And he could see the hesitation in her eyes. I didn't mean to put you on the spot, Lila, Bezos said, his voice softening slightly. But you have something I don't see every day. A willingness to speak your mind. Even when it's not what people want to hear. And that's rare. Lila stood frozen. Her thoughts colliding. One moment. She had been just another flight attendant on a routine flight. The next. She was in a room with two of the most influential people in the world. Being offered an opportunity she had never dreamed of. But something felt off. Was this really what she wanted? Or was it just the adrenaline? The shock? The allure of stepping into a completely different world? I'm flattered. Really? Lila began. Her voice steadied despite the whirlwind inside her. But I've spent my life flying planes. Taking care of passengers. It's what I know. I don't know the first thing about running a business or managing a big project. Bezos smiled again. That calm, confident smile that made him seem so in control. You don't have to know everything, Lila. You're resourceful. You've got good instincts. And that's what counts. Besides, you'll have people who can teach you. You won't be doing this alone. Lila looked from Bezos to Mr. Armstrong. The weight of their words hung in the air. Heavy and tangible. She felt the pull of something larger. Something that could change the course of her life forever. But it wasn't just about ambition or prestige, it was about stepping into the unknown. And that terrified her. I understand the opportunity, Lila said slowly. But I need to think about it. I can't make a decision like this on the spot. Bezos nodded thoughtfully. Of course. Take your time. I'm not in a rush. But I'll tell you this, opportunities like this don't come often. It's easy to overlook them. To stay in your comfort zone. But if you step out. If you trust yourself. He paused. His eyes locking onto hers. As if trying to see her very soul. You could change everything.
Lila felt her pulse quicken. Was she really ready to step away from the life she had built? To embrace something so big and uncertain? She had always prided herself on being independent. On making her own way. But could she handle the kind of pressure that came with working alongside someone like Bezos?
The room was silent for a long moment. As Lila's mind raced through 1,000 possibilities. She had been offered many things in her life, free drinks. A promotion. Compliments, but nothing like this. Nothing that felt like it could truly change the course of her future. Finally. She spoke. Her voice quiet but firm. I need time to think. This isn't just a job. This is a new life. Bezos nodded again. His eyes never leaving hers. I respect that. Take all the time you need. I'm sure you'll make the right choice. Lila felt a strange mix of relief and anxiety wash over her. The ball was in her court now. There was no more pressure. No more rush. She had been given a moment to breathe. A moment to decide who she wanted to be. As she left the captain's office. Her mind felt like a battlefield. The excitement of a new opportunity was undeniable. But the fear of losing everything she had known weighed heavily on her heart. She walked slowly back to her post. Trying to make sense of it all. But just as she was about to step onto the tarmac. A voice called out to her.
Lila.
She turned. And there was Bezos again. Standing at the entrance of the jet bridge. His expression was unreadable. But there was something in his eyes, a flicker of something genuine. Almost human. Whatever you decide, he said. His voice low but sincere. I hope you never lose that fire. That spark that made you challenge me today. It's rare. Don't let it go. Lila stood there. Feeling as though the weight of the world had just shifted on its axis. What was she supposed to do now? She had been offered a chance that most people would kill for, but at what cost? Was she ready to leave behind her quiet, familiar life for a world of high stakes and uncharted waters? She didn't have the answer. Not yet. But for the first time in a long time. She wasn't sure she needed one. The next few days passed in a blur for Lila. She couldn't shake the feeling that her life had suddenly been catapulted into another dimension. Every moment felt like she was standing on the edge of a cliff. Looking out over an unknown world. She couldn't stop thinking about Bezos's words. About the offer. About the world she had been invited into. Her phone had buzzed with messages from the airline's management. And from Mr. Armstrong. Checking in on her decision. She'd been avoiding them. Not because she didn't want to make the decision, but because she couldn't find the clarity she needed. One morning. After a restless night of tossing and turning. Lila found herself at the airport. Preparing for her usual flight. She had the same uniform on. The same duties to perform. The same routine she had lived for years. But everything felt different now. The weight of what was at stake had taken root deep inside her. As she walked through the terminal toward her gate. She glanced over at the flight schedule and realized something. She was standing at a crossroads. The world she had always known was here. Waiting for her to return to it. But that world wasn't the only one that had come into focus recently. Bezos's offer, it was more than just an opportunity. It was a challenge. To step out of her comfort zone. To take a leap into something bigger than herself. But was she ready to take that leap? Her phone buzzed again, this time with a message from her best friend. Sarah. So. Have you made a decision yet?
Lila paused and read the message. She closed her eyes for a moment, feeling a lump form in her throat. Sarah was one of the few people who knew what Lila had been going through. She was the one who always told Lila to follow her heart, no matter how scary it was.
Lila sat down at a quiet bench. The hum of the airport around her as she typed a reply. I'm scared. Sarah. I don't know if I'm ready to leave everything behind. The reply came quickly, you don't have to leave everything behind. Lila. You're just adding something new to your life. But you can't let fear stop you. Not this time. Lila let out a slow breath. Staring at the screen. Her finger hovered over the keyboard. And for a moment, she thought about all the reasons not to take the job, the comfort of her current life. The fear of failure. The uncertainty of it all. But then she thought about Bezos's face. The calm in his voice. The belief he had shown in her. Even when she had no idea what she was doing. She had been given a chance to build something new, not just for herself, but for the people who believed in her. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to believe in herself, too. Lila typed her response with a renewed sense of determination, I'm going for it. The decision felt like a weight lifted off her chest. It wasn't easy. And it wasn't clear. But for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was choosing something for herself, something big. Later that day, as the plane prepared for takeoff, Lila found a quiet moment to call Mr. Armstrong. Her hand shook slightly as she held the phone to her ear. Mr. Armstrong, she said. Her voice steady but filled with a quiet resolve. I've thought about it. And I'm ready to accept Mr. Bezos's offer. I want to be a part of the project. There was a long pause on the other end before Armstrong replied. I'm glad to hear that. Lila. We're all excited to have you on board. You won't regret it. Lila hung up. Her heart racing. It was official. There was no going back now. She had made her choice. But even as the excitement built within her, she couldn't ignore the subtle, underlying fear. The world she was about to step into was vast and intimidating. And she wasn't sure where it would take her. But one thing was certain, she wasn't going to back down. As the plane lifted into the sky, Lila looked out the window at the sprawling city below. The world seemed so small from this height. But she knew it was filled with possibilities. The unknown stretched out before her, wide and open, waiting for her to make her mark. She had taken the leap. Now, it was time to see how high she could soar.